Pam Persichetti. I'm the Alumni Engagement Officer at TCNJ. And this Industry Insider webinar series is brought to you all through the Office of Alumni Engagement. So thank you for joining us for our first webinar of the school year. And we have two wonderful alumni who are joining us today. Let a couple people in here. Pamela Elmy, class of 91, and Aubrey Horvath, class of 05, both of which are going to share their experience in nonprofit building, as that is our topic today. I will also mention we have a couple more webinars slated for the rest of the fall. We have one in November and December, and I won't give get too much into detail about those, but you can check them out on our alumni website if you want to join in for more as the semester rolls on. So I am going to do a few quick housekeeping items, but then I'm going to turn it over to Pamela and Aubrey for them to kind of introduce themselves and give a much more in-depth background than I ever could about each of their experiences. So we will have a Q&A at the end. So if you'd like to hold questions until then, we encourage you to do so at the end. We set some time aside specifically for Q&A, so please feel free. So Pamela is, I said, a 91 grad. She's also the founder and director of Robbinsville Extended Day. And Aubrey is an 05 grad, the co-founder of the Christine Petoni Foundation. Both of them have experience building, creating nonprofits, being board members, kind of the whole gamut of nonprofit involvement that they're going to share with you guys. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Pamela to introduce herself, and we'll kick things off. So thank you both for being with us and taking time out, not only today, but in the planning for this as well. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Pam. It's an honor to be here. Hi, everyone. I am an artist and a certified teacher who kind of fell into the nonprofit sector in the 90s, teaching art in an after-school program for the Metro Atlanta YMCA. Since then, I have become a leader in community education, working as education coordinator for the Center for Puppetry Arts in Atlanta, Georgia. We have a Georgia connection here. Director of Program Development for the YWCA Princeton, New Jersey. Executive Director of Princeton Young Achievers, also in Princeton, New Jersey. I designed and run the current Red After School program for Robbinsville, New Jersey Public Schools, and I'm in my 11th year there. Since I believe in giving back to the community, as I would imagine all of you are, I have served on the Board of Trustees for Princeton Community Housing for 5 years, and I currently serve as Volunteer Development Director for the Nassau Film Festival in Princeton, New Jersey. That's an international independent film festival that happens every May. So I'm just so happy to be here and answer any questions later. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. I want to say that I'm excited to be talking with Pamela because I'm going to be learning from her. My name is Aubrey, and I am very much the greenhorn here, having just co-founded the Atlanta-based nonprofit, the Christine Petoni Foundation. We are actually set to launch in just a few weeks on October 25th, after I would say about 18 months of planning. And like Pam, I think Pam and I are both in service-based nonprofits. So the goal of my nonprofit is to improve financial literacy and reduce underemployment in working women. And we do this in a couple of different ways. We offer free education. We have a workforce development program that's a combination of two equally important parts, a mentorship program and a curriculum-based boot camp. And then finally, we will in the future offer financial assistance because we recognize that money can help remove barriers to success. So I encourage you all to check out our nonprofit after we go live on the 25th. All your support is welcomed. So yeah, so I think I can speak a little bit to more of the beginning process. So I'm going to walk you through the beginning stages of starting a nonprofit, and then I'm going to turn it over to Pamela, and she's going to take you through what you need for long-term success. And she has a lot more experience than I do in that area. So the two different things that I'm going to focus on first is I have a little takeaway here that you'll see in a second. I'll share my screen. And it's a basic kind of one-page strategic form on how to figure out your 5 W's. Those like who, what, where, when, and why. And those are really going to come in handy when you're trying to find your mission statement. So let me share my screen really quick. And go. So can you guys all see that? Perfect. Okay. So this form was actually something that I used in the very beginning of my nonprofit, because you have all these ideas that are going through your head and it's hard to narrow them down and make them into a cohesive thought and then make that thought into a tangible product that will put good out into the world. So you guys, I think Pam is going to send this to you guys after the talk and you can sit with it. It's very casual. You can share it with people. It's great for a conversation starter when you're talking to board members, especially in the beginning of this process. So the first one is just, why does your nonprofit exist? And I feel like this is personal to everyone. And from other people who have also gone through this process, it's really important to be passionate about your mission, because if you're not, the time and the honestly financial contribution that's going to go into this, it's going to fizzle out before it gets off the ground. So, what is the purpose of bringing this idea to life? And so I can say for me, it was a combination of 2 different things. I have always kind of found myself drawn to other organizations that are doing similar things to what we are planning on doing. And then I think the tipping point for me was when my best friend and lifelong colleague from New Jersey, we grew up in Hillsborough, New Jersey, right down the street, passed away. And she was very much, she was an Atlanta-based businesswoman who was a fierce advocate for increasing the representation of women leaders in the workforce. And so she had already been doing this. And I think that it was important to honor her in that way and carry on this great part. So mine is a 2-part reason for why I do it, but you do have to find that in order to find your niche. Secondly, who is your market audience? So I can speak to, so for us, we are starting small. We are specifically an Atlanta-based nonprofit right now. And we are focusing on women between the ages of 22 and 55 who are changing careers or re-entering the workforce after taking some extended time off. This is also going to help you with your marketing as you create a website and you're putting stuff out on social media to know who you're targeting. Because if you just put it out there for everyone, I think you're going to have trouble building your community. Thirdly, are those core values. So these are typically values that are personified in the people that we admire. So when I did this, it was literally just words that resonated with me, and it's going to help you with your SEO later. It's going to drive people to your website and to your social media posts based on those values. Then there's your brand promise. And for me, this has kind of evolved over the course of creating our nonprofit. And I think that it will continue to evolve as we look at the analytics from our website and find out where the need really is and finding that niche for us. And then next are your goals and objectives. List 3 things that you want to accomplish over the next 5 years. I think this is important for you because I will give you an example of one of our goals. So one of our goals for the next 5 years is a confirmation that 25 women had a positive professional career change after completing our workforce development program. And this is great because you have to think about in the future how you will measure success within your company. That's going to be really important in these initial steps when you're filling out your 1023 form, which is the application for recognition of exemption from federal income taxes. They're going to be asking all these questions, and you need to be able to show, how you're measuring success and why you should get these exemptions. So just be thinking about that. And then list 3 things you want for your nonprofit to accomplish over the next 12 months. I mean, it's good to have short-term goals and be able to set a timeline on it so that you know that you're meeting those expectations. And then this one is just kind of my own thing. Give your best 3-minute elevator pitch. In the beginning, I would talk about the foundation and they'd be like, I'm sorry, I still don't understand. What do you do? So like getting that 3-minute elevator pitch down to, and also so that everyone on your board is on the same page and you guys are all saying the same thing. So really get that out there. Alrighty, and then I'm going to switch over. The second thing that I'm going to talk about is going to be the actual incorporation process. So I'm going to stop sharing this. And then Pam, if you wouldn't mind sharing that PDF.
Is everyone seeing the slideshow?
I can see it. Yeah, so, okay. So this next one, this is just something that our foundation put together. And this is just to help you. If you're anything like me, I love checklists. I love seeing what has to be done in the future. So this is specific to Georgia, but in some of our pre-conference stuff, I had also collaborated with Pamela, and she said that this is very similar to the New Jersey process. So be aware that there are always nuances to different states, but that for the most part, this is pretty cohesive. So the first one is just your steps to incorporating, and it's going to go through a bunch of the different processes in the order that you have to do them in. So this first one is deciding a formal legal entity. So when you're doing this, make sure that you are picking a name that is unique. Try Googling it, because I guarantee you when I started the Christine Petoni Foundation, we thought we'd just shorten it to the KPF. You would be surprised on how many other people already have that domain or some version of that domain. So make sure that you Google it, make sure there's no copyright issues, and make sure it's easy to spell and something that you can remember. Because I recently went to the Tory Burch Summit in New York, and her foundation does a lot of work on empowering women. And I had met a lot of other nonprofit founders and business women, and they would say, oh, what is the name of your foundation? And I would say the Christine Petoni Foundation, and people were like, I'm sorry, is that 2 T's, 1 I? Like, I can't remember this. And so we have made our handle now, instead of having the long name, we are KPF Woman, which is a way that people can remember you. And it is also building like pride and brand around what we're doing. So just keep those kind of in the back of your mind when you are picking that. So the next one is going to be assigning roles within your organization. So the first one is your incorporators, and the incorporators are basically the people who are founding your organization. So for me, it's myself and my co-founder. These are the people that you're gonna who are going to sign your articles of incorporation, and there are different laws around like minimums that you can have in your state. The next one is your director. And so your board of directors, these are the people that are going to advise you and who are going to vote. So just remember that, like I am a co-founder of my organization, but I don't sit on the board of directors. So people don't seem to understand nonprofits, nobody owns you. So I don't make the decisions, my board does. And so if I don't agree with something that they're doing, I mean, I don't get the final vote, they do. So just keep that in mind. And then we have our officers. That's just like your president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. I'm going to talk a little bit more about a registered agent later. And then you can consider hiring people for this. I will let you know, you can hire someone to do all of this, but it does cost money. And I think with this kind of guide, it's pretty simple to do these things yourself if you do them in order. So next is the file for your articles of incorporation. So your articles of incorporation are documents you file usually with your Secretary of State to legally document the creation of your corporation. And the information on this slide, I'm not going to go into it too much, but it's just kind of like the musts that you have in Georgia, and then some other things that you may need. So you can read through those and then check them against whatever state it is that you're looking to start the nonprofit in. This is just the next slide is just a screenshot of our Georgia one. So, and then finally is you need to file your initial report and annual registration. So this is normally a small fee, and you need to register every year, and you need to do this so you can apply for your solicitation license in whatever state you're in. So you can't start taking money from people until you have that solicitation license and your 501c3 status, which is that tax exempt code. Next is obtaining your EIN number. So the EIN, this is your tax ID number. So it's a federal number that identifies your company. This is free. There's a bunch of third parties out there that are going to try to tell you that you need to pay for this. It's not. So when you're doing stuff, just look online, make sure that you know what things you have to pay for and what things are free, because there are people out there that are trying to take advantage of the nonprofit sector. And you'll eventually put this number on your website so that people can look you up to confirm that you are a nonprofit. It's really important to have that transparency. And although it is not required, it is best practice to have it up there so people can look you up and see what you're using your money for, and make sure that you're putting it to the use that your donors think you are. And then the next one is establishing your bylaws. So here's something I will tell you guys, my professional life has been as an emergency room nurse. I am not a lawyer. I don't work in this area all the time. That just goes to show you that anyone can do this if you can like organize yourself and put it together, because it is a lot of steps. But so for the bylaws, I didn't know how to do this. And so you can buy these documents on LegalZoom or something like that, and they will personalize it for you for a small fee. I think I paid somewhere between like $40 and $60 to do this. And so it's not that expensive. Next is your conflict of interest policies. And these are documents that you will have to have your board members sign. These are just saying that, there's no conflict. You're not soliciting money from somebody who is benefiting from this organization. And you can also find these documents on places like LegalZoom if you can't find them for free online. And again, there's a lot more information on some of these slides you guys can look through. I do want to give Pamela a chance to talk after I go, so I'm going to keep trekking through here. The next one is holding organizational meetings. Once you guys do get underway, I encourage you to, when you have board meetings, have somebody taking minutes, have somebody documenting all this stuff, because it will be important later. And it's also great to see where you started and where you've come. I can't believe 18 months ago, I could never have told you that we would have a 40-page manual on a work development program to help Metro Atlanta women. I mean, and it's kind of inspiring, and it's also, you need it for legal reasons. So make sure that you do that. The next one is getting your state tax ID numbers. So this is different than your EIN. The EIN is a federal number. The other one is a state number. And I don't believe, and Pamela, maybe you can speak to this, I don't believe that is necessary in every state.
I can't speak for every state, but if there's something required, New Jersey has all of them.
Okay, perfect. Good to know. Okay. And then Pamela's going to dive, I believe, Pamela, you're going to dive more into this. This is the actual 1023 form that I talked about before. This is that form that you have to file for tax exempt status. In my opinion, I would suggest doing the long form if you can. It is going to be more expensive it will be more expensive. I believe it's around, we put it on here, it's like $600 in the state of Georgia for this, versus $275 for the short form. But the good thing about this is you don't have, do the long form now if you have time, so that you don't have to get your nonprofit. So your nonprofit status doesn't get revoked later if you make over a certain amount of money. So if you make over $50,000 in 1 year, you would have to then do the long form, and it requires more information. So the easy form you can get in, I think it's 6 weeks, and the long form took us with the world in a pandemic and backlog with the IRS, who's already a slow process. It took us almost a year of waiting. So if your nonprofit is something that you need to get started right away and you need to collect money, do the easy form. If it's something that you can be working on as you're building your program, I would suggest doing the long form, and it will help you in the end. And then here we go. Apply for the state tax exemption. Again, that is state specific, so you can look into it. And then register for your charitable solicitations. Like I said before, you need this before you can start asking people for money and for them to get a tax break from it. And that's a big deal when you're approaching corporations or large businesses, because they do want that tax write-off from you. So make sure that you get that. And then, yeah. So other permits and licensing and stuff that you can see links at the end. But other than that, I'm going to turn it over to Pamela now, so she can tell you about long-term success, and we'll take questions at the end. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Aubrey, and congratulations on establishing your nonprofit. I am so excited to see where it goes, and what a meaningful way to honor the legacy of your friend. Well, once you get the 501c3 established, that's usually when you wake up and say, oh, wow, now I have to actually do this. So I'm going to talk to you about the day-to-day operations of running a successful nonprofit. And I'd like to note that the lifespan of some nonprofits end when the goal of their mission is fulfilled. So for example, a cure for cancer would happily be the end of the line for cancer organizations. Other nonprofits last for decades or generations and morph with the times to adapt and serve its population. Just as how, for example, hydroponic farming is now changing the look of food insecurity missions, okay? So what you want to do is follow up with that wonderful work of establishing your nonprofit and making sure that you're building a legacy. Based on my experience, I believe there are 6 focus areas to build upon for your highest level of success. Pam is going to include these bullet points at the end, but to tell you the 6 that I'm going to go over: fund development, program development and assessment, volunteer and staff management, nonprofit budget and accounting, public policy and advocacy, and legal. So to start with fund development, obviously that's the money coming in to keep your nonprofit alive and serving your constituents. There are really 4 main ways to do that, and you want to do all of them to be successful. The first is the direct donor appeal, otherwise known as an annual appeal. Those are fund drives, mailings, social media crowdsourcing. It's when you really start to establish your donor database, and then you do the ask to them once a year for individual donation. Choose your season. Most nonprofits do their annual appeal in December, but that doesn't mean that has to be your time. You can do it in June if you want. Think about when that's going to be and be consistent with it. Make sure you secure a database and messenger services. For example, in the public schools, we use School Messenger. In my particular program, I use RegWorks, but there's a lot out there. Find the best for you. The second is to hold an annual fundraiser event. Okay, that's the glitzy fun stuff. You want to do one event that's going to draw a crowd, you're going to sell tickets, and that's going to be a boost to your bottom line. It could be a concert, auction, 5K, gala, dinner, fashion show. You get what I'm talking about. Make sure your profit exceeds your cost and effort. I know nowadays it's, a big thing to be extra and do tablescapes and all this, but be careful, because the goal is to put money back into your nonprofit and not to, go all out and use up your resources. So you want to find a happy medium. If you're watching this webinar, you're beyond now the point of a bake sale. Even though we all love a cupcake, you're way beyond that now. What I suggest is tap into your board. If they have connections to celebrities, that draws in the most people and gets you the highest price on your ticket. When I ran Princeton Young Achievers, we had a connection to Kevin Bacon. We brought him in and filled the Richardson auditorium. So now you can say you have a person that's 1 degree of separation from Kevin Bacon instead of 6. There you go. So that is something you want to do once a year. Pick your time to do it. Grants. Grants are something that you should be doing all year long. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. If you get one donor that, you have secured one large grant, you have to keep working at it and get a lot of little ones, because you could depend on one grant for an area of your nonprofit, and you may not get that one the next cycle, and then you're in trouble. So, spread it out. You have to be writing grants all the time. You or someone on your staff should be prolific at writing and very detail oriented. You can get private, corporate, and government grants. You must follow the terms of the grant to its completion. So let's say for food insecurity, you in the grant, you said, I'm going to deliver X amount of meals to the homebound. You can't just change midstream and say, oh, you know what? I think I'm going to do a community garden instead. You can't do that. You have to follow to the letter what you agreed upon in the submission of the grant. You have to report upon the grant progress at the end too. You have to show outcome measurement. If you don't follow what you originally said you were going to do, and if you don't show outcome measurement, they could ask for the money back. So keep that cycle in mind. Capital campaign. That is a one-time specific project-based way of doing a fundraiser. Let's say you need a new roof for your building. You will advertise and solicit donations just for that roof. There will be a start and an end point and a goal to reach to complete that particular project. That's usually a one-time deal. Think of the old thermometers at the fire stations, and someone have to color in the ink for the mercury to go to reach your goal. That's a small example of what I'm talking about. It's project oriented, okay? On to program development and assessment. If you are running the nonprofit, you should be pretty much an expert in that field, whether it's childcare, whether it's the arts, whether it's, breast cancer research. You should have a good deal of knowledge on that, and so should your team. So when you're building the operations, like Aubrey said, you want to identify your service area, you build relationships. Nonprofit is building lifelong relationships. You want to do focus groups when you start out. When I first came to Robbinsville, where I didn't know a soul and I had to build things from the ground up, I had focus groups at the schools, and I met with parents and I listened to them first before even saying anything. I wanted to hear what the community needed, and that was really valuable. And then from those focus groups, you can choose key people that might be on focus groups to help you carry out your mission. Determine how many staff and volunteers you need, and also the outcome measurement. Do surveys. I use SurveyMonkey a lot, but be prepared for both negative and positive data. You cannot change the data, all right? So you may be tracking how many people participate. You might be having people score you, but if it's positive, great. You can use that to go back to your board and your donors. If it's negative, you have to be honest about it and say, this is what we can do better, all right? Volunteer and staff management. Develop a staff manual, consult with the gratis HR firm or a labor lawyer. The manual should include code of conduct, social media policy. That's very important today. Fingerprinting and background checks are a must, especially when you're working with children. Use every age group spectrum for volunteer recruiting. Colleges and universities, parent groups, retired associations, senior citizens, okay? Just really diversify the people that you're working with. Be up to date on changing minimum wage, Affordable Care Act, and the employment of minors laws, especially in New Jersey, but nationwide. Those are very fluid right now. And you have a responsibility to make sure you're following labor laws. Just because you're tax exempt doesn't mean you can't get fined. For example, if you have all part-time hourly people, they cannot exceed 29 hours. If they do, you have to offer them health insurance. So you got to keep track of that stuff. Like Aubrey said, choose your board of directors wisely. They do have the final say. And also watch out for micromanagement. So this is when your personal skills really come to play, because these people are volunteering their time and expertise, but you don't want them to hijack the organization either with personal interests. So you're going to do a very delicate ballet with your board, and your board is going to change over the years because there are term limits. So you have to be flexible and evolve with your changing board and the changing times. The executive director is the face of the organization, both in personal and professional life. When I ran Princeton Young Achievers, I lived on the same block where my office was. And I was okay with the fact that when I was walking my dog on a Saturday, I was still the executive director of Princeton Young Achievers, and I conducted myself accordingly. So keep that in mind when choosing an executive director. Your CFO, chief financial officer, or treasurer is also imperative. And that takes me into nonprofit budget and accounting. Nonprofits are the invisible arm of the government. It's almost like quid pro quo. The Revenue Act of 1954 is what brought us to the same 501c3 tax exempt laws and status that we see today. The government is saying, we're entrusting you to serve the community in this particular area so that we don't have to directly do it. We're going to make sure you do it well. And in turn, you don't have to pay taxes. So in addition to the original filings Aubrey was talking about, every year you have to complete 990. A Form 990 is a tax exempt filing form to provide the IRS with public financial information. There are schedules A to O. Schedule A is the most common. Schedule N is when you want to dissolve your nonprofit. 990 forms apply to hospitals, schools, and religious organizations as well. A good thing for you to know if you want to join a board, make sure you specify if you want your home address or the nonprofit address on that 990. Because as a board member, your name is now publicly on that document, and they're just going to automatically put your home address on there unless you ask them not to. Okay. The difference between a 501c3 and a corporation is all of your profits must go directly back into the organization. All right. If you have a good year, it's not to build a pool in the backyard of the director. It's to buy more books for your kids, what have you. All your profit goes back in for the betterment of your organization. Use an accounting system to start off. QuickBooks is great. That's how I started. Use a payroll system, paychecks, ADP, what have you. Use a nonprofit accountant to file that 990 every year. If you can find a nonprofit accountant, because they know the rules a little bit better. Use an independent auditing firm on a regular basis as deemed by the board, okay? The board can determine how often you do that, but you have to do that at some point. Have trusted signatories on file at the bank to sign those checks that go out. That's a very responsible role. Have a finance committee and use an online payment processor, okay? Public policy and advocacy, that goes to program development. Be prepared to make public statements if newsworthy events happen in the scope of your mission. Have one spokesperson run things by the board and have a scripted response for the press. Rally for policy change in Washington, D.C. if applicable to your mission. Be a spokesperson for what you are advocating for. Create public awareness and continually attend trainings like you're doing today. Finally, legal. This is really important because, like Aubrey said, you put a lot of work into this. You don't want one lawsuit to just evaporate everything, which it could. So retain either a pro bono or contracted law firm. You could also try your local bar association. New Jersey has a great one in New Brunswick who will do that work for you for free in the beginning. Write all emails and written communications with a litigious mindset, okay? Anything can be OPRA'd, which is the Open Records Request Act. I was OPRA'd once, wasn't worried about it because I think about and recheck every email before I send it. Keep the board apprised of any accusations, as slight as they may seem. You don't want your board to be blindsided by any kind of a lawsuit. Keep that communication open. When working with children, people with disabilities, or the elderly, those are risky areas that require the highest liability insurance. Okay, so you have liability insurance, workers' comp insurance, and if you want to join a board, a good way of researching that nonprofit, in addition to checking their 990s on GuideStar or Charity Navigator, is ask them if they have DNO insurance, directors and officers insurance. This protects you in case there's a big lawsuit and won't ruin your career over your volunteer assignment. Again, select your employees and volunteers wisely. They represent your brand. Watch their social media and have corrective action plans. Document everything. Hear all voices in your community and conduct equity training to avoid acts of implicit bias. Follow all licensing regulations and maintain your facilities. If you're joining a board, just go with your passion. That's one of my 3 takeaways. Do what you love to do. And finally, in closure, communicate openly and honestly at all times. I know that was a lot, but I'm done.
It was a lot because it has to be a lot. There's a lot to go into it and a lot to think about. Oh, we have a question already, but we'll hold that to the end. I did just want to give you guys a moment to kind of highlight your 3 most meaningful takeaways in your processes. May have already kind of touched upon it, but if there were 3 things that each of you could share with the audience that were the most valuable things to keep in mind, what would they be? And I'll kick it back over to Aubrey to answer first, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think because I am at the beginning of this process, I think mine are going to be a little different than Pamela. And so for me, find an accountant That was the big thing for us. There are a lot of fees associated with this. I am blessed to have a retired IRS tax attorney on my board. Not everyone is that lucky. So if you're not good with numbers and spreadsheets, definitely find someone to do that and to keep track of your filings that you're going to have to do, because you have to keep up with multiple different filings on a yearly basis. The next one I would say is to put money into your website and your social media outlets, because that is where you're going to build your community. I mean, that is your face. So it's out there every day and people are using it to find out information about you and share it. So put your money into that. And then the other one is find out where you can get money from. I actually didn't realize at the beginning of this process how much money there is out there that you can get from other places. I have an entire spreadsheet with 250 organizations that don't necessarily do what I do, but I mean, it's anywhere from the Atlanta Hawks, who give money to local nonprofits that make a difference, to, a small nonprofit organization that is their only job, is to collect money and to give it to other nonprofits within your community to do good. So I would look into that. And like Pamela had said, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Like, no, if you depend on a $50,000 grant every year and that grant goes away, have a backup. So yeah, those are my biggest ones. As the
Thanks,
greenhorn.
Thank you. The greenhorn. Not for long. Pamela, how about you?
Okay, well, number one, find your passion, because that's what this is all about. You know, it's funny, when I graduated from back then Trenton State, and I got started in this world, a lot of my friends were like, how are you going to eat? How are you going to survive? And yes, I was poor for a long time, but that was by choice. And I always followed my passion. And you know what? I'm not poor anymore. I'm actually very successful. And I never worried about it, because, you meet so many wonderful people along the way. If your passion is in it, you're going to be successful. And number two is recruit and retain a good board. And finally, assure that you are legally protected.
That's great. Thank you both. Thank you both for all of this. Really valuable information that you shared with everyone. I saw a couple of people taking notes. And as both of the panelists mentioned, I will send out kind of a follow-up one-sheeter to all of the emails that you registered under. So take a look for that in the coming days, and some of the links and PDFs that the two panelists have put together will be shared there. But certainly we want to answer any questions that you have right now. So please feel free to either unmute, use the hand raise feature. We love the interaction. But if you're more comfortable, then please enter in the chat. And I do see that we have a question in the chat. What was the name of the pro bono law organization in New Brunswick? Pamela, I think you might have mentioned.
The New Jersey State Bar Association.
All right, thank you. So I have a question that I actually thought of when we were listening to this, and it was in your top 3 takeaways, Pamela. When you are recruiting a board members, is there a particular place that you look for certain folks? You want it to be well-rounded, and like you said at the top of your presentation, you don't want to be micromanaged either. So, what are some places, some resources you used when recruiting board members?
I was lucky because I spent most of my career in Princeton, and I have a university right up the street. So you have to look to your community and what kind of resources are there. I think the way to recruit a board, it evolves over time. When you're first starting out, Aubrey and I, we mentioned these positions. We mentioned having an accountant, having a CFO, having a lawyer, having someone who can write well. Well, in the beginning, you're not going to be able to pay all these people, and you're not going to be able to do it yourself forever. So in the beginning, I would say look for people that have those skill sets that can help volunteer their time. So, for example, the Bar Association is where you might find a recent law school graduate to help you and join your board. And, you know, fiduciary responsibility is a misnomer, because I joined boards when I was very young and, yes, poor, and I exchanged that for my time. And then when I got older and had money, I gave back later. So I just think look for the specific talent that you need.
And kind of a follow-up to that, we have someone that asked, are there limitations on related family board members?
That is for your nonprofit lawyer to answer. You have to be very careful, especially when they have any kind of financial responsibility. Because, for example, in the public schools, you have to sign off publicly if you're related to anyone in the organization, and that is audited. Those that are related are audited.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And I just wanted to comment, someone had just put something in the chat about how would you suggest soliciting help for grant writing? I can speak for Georgia in particular. I just found a resource. It's the Georgia Center for Nonprofits, and it is a subscription-based organization that you can belong to, but they offer classes on grant writing. They offer help in all different areas. So find the one that is in your state and reach out to them. Even if it is a small cost per year, the networking opportunity can be substantial.
That's awesome. Thank you.
And I will also say, I know like the process can be daunting. And if you do have the funds, there are nonprofit law firms out there that for a couple $1,000s will do all these things for you. So, I mean, it wasn't the case for us. And like Pam said, we recruited board members that had a lot of different backgrounds in marketing, in, you know, IRS tax attorneys, and people that could really help us. So reach into your community. There are people there that want to help. My website designer reached out to Christine's sorority at Georgia Tech. And there are a lot of software engineering students at Georgia Tech who need volunteer hours for graduation and would love to help a nonprofit, and they are free. So yeah, I mean, look in your community.
Great. Thank you. Looks like someone else, Bonnie, added grant rating. I'll rate for you. NJ.com. There you go. There's another link in the chat. All right. We have another question. Do you suggest interviewing board members? Was that a step that you took outside of seeking specific skills? Did either of you interview or have you been interviewed?
Aubrey, that's an Aubrey question, I think.
Oh, okay. I did not interview people. I will say that the people on my board are way more impressive than I am. And so they all offer a plethora of information. And so I wouldn't say that moving forward, I wouldn't, like, if somebody chose to step down for personal reasons, or like Pamela said, find people with the time. I have a couple C-suite people on my board who are like, listen, I need you to tell me what you need because I don't have time. So they are there as a resource right now, but I will say that going forward, you know, if we find someone that has the same passion, but a little bit more time, it could be a good fit. So interviewing could be a good thing in the future.
And Pamela, have you ever been interviewed with any of the boards that you've sat on?
No, actually, I haven't, because people already knew me, and I think they already knew my work. So it was just a direct ask, and that's kind of how it happened to me the 3 times I was serving on a board.
Yeah, that kind of speaks to what Aubrey mentioned. Here's an interesting one. How do you get rid of board members who are not helpful?
I'm gonna let Pamela take that one. I have not had that experience yet.
No one wants to take that one.
You throw them a nice dinner and get them a plaque and say thank you. No, it's actually, that's why you really have to take your time in the beginning when you hire people and when you bring on board members, because it's a lot harder to fire someone, so to speak, than, taking the time to make sure you make wise selections. I've seen those situations before, and it's really tricky. It's not something that's done quickly unless the person breaks the law. But if it's because they're annoying or something, sorry, you can't do that. You just have to find the right roles for people. But that's a real last resort, because it could send negative ripple effects in your community because they're volunteers.
And maybe consider board terms in the beginning, setting up how long their terms might be, and think about that strategically for that reason. Make sure to have term limits. There you go, in the bylaws. Well, we have a couple more minutes if anyone has any other questions, comments.
Can I ask a question to Pamela?
Of course.
You had mentioned that there are better times during the year to do the majority of your fundraising. What times of year do you find that it is most beneficial?
I've noticed a trend in the past few years that everyone used to do their annual appeal around the holidays. And a lot of it is because people have money sitting around and they want to just allocate that and donate it so they get the tax write-offs in for that year. But I think people are so inundated with information, especially after the pandemic, that now I'm noticing a lot more doing it in June. So it's either June or December are the most common months, but it's really up to you. I still think it depends on if you know that you have a lot of donors with disposable incomes. December is still good because they're scrambling to get those checks written that maybe they didn't think about it during the year.
Thank you.
And I addressed the last question in the chat, but we have all of our webinars recorded and archived on our website. So I put a link to that. Specifically, there's a tab in our website to the webinars. And there is quite a few in the archives if you want to go back and check out some of our past webinars, as well as this one that will be up in the coming days. Certainly, I'd say by the end of next week, you can find it there. And so as we wrap up, any last minute questions in the chat, but I just want to reiterate and thank you again for your time, your expertise, your knowledge. Thank you both for sharing it with us. I think this was very valuable for the folks that tune in. I think there were a lot of good takeaways, and hopefully everyone in our audience is, in a better direction, setting up their own nonprofit. Certainly, I know I would be.
Yeah. And please feel free to share the PowerPoint or the handout from here with the group.
Will do. Yeah, we'll put a nice comprehensive follow-up together for everyone.
Yeah, and enjoy all the attachments. Those are for your use. And if you need to reach me about any of the nonprofits I mentioned, those links will be listed as well.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. And Aubrey and Pamela, thank you again. Everyone have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for having us.